Morning brewers, it's about 7 AM here in England. I'm up and brewing early because I've got a double brew day on. And stocks are a bit low following Christmas. All my beers were popular and they've pretty much gone. So I'm doing a double day to catch up, kicking off with a standard English bitter. So my bog standard recipe is always about 4 kilos of grain, which will include about 100 of something like aromatic or Munich to give a bit of a malty kick, a little bit of black malt for colour, and then ferment it with an English ale yeast. For Christmas my daughter got me this lovely mash paddle, personalised all the way from Abbey Cat Brewery in America. Bless her. And not only is it a beautiful thing, handcrafted maple thing, it does a really good job of stirring the mash. And this slotted design really stirs everything up and breaks all the grist up. So water wise, I use a balanced water profile for this beer, so that's about 70 parts per million sulphate, 70 parts per million chloride, 50 parts per million calcium. My water is really hard minerally, so for most recipes I have to start by diluting it with some reverse osmosis water just to get the mineral level down, and then I can start moving it up to where I want it to be, and that's what I've done with this one. So I'm going to check in at different points throughout the course of the double brew day just to see how it's going and pick up a few brew house tips with you. So I'll get this mashed in and then I'll see you upstairs at the fermentation fridge. Okay, that's happily mashing there, and this is the back up at the fermentation fridge now. So I'm going to be pitching this bitter, in fact the next two brews, with White Lab 002, which is an English ale yeast. And I just wanted to talk to you about yeast and why I like that particular one. Quite apart from being good for the style, of course, English ale yeast, it's also the most amazingly flocculent yeast I've ever come across. It just drops clear so quickly. So what I've got in here is another batch of exactly the same beer that I'm mashing downstairs, but this is going off for a weekend party so it'll all get drunk. It's been fermented with 002. It's about 12 days in there now. I've done nothing with it. Hasn't been fine, hasn't been cold crashed. Let's have a look. Can you see that? How clear that is? I mean, you could just, well, I will be, you could just keg that as it is. So this beer is incredibly flocculent. It just drops out as soon as it's finished. In fact, I've started now on about day 5 of fermentation to give it a bit of a rouse, because it tends to drop out a bit early and then be very slow to finish in my experience. So I reuse my yeast, as you'll have seen if you watched any of my earlier videos. I reuse them when I buy them, so I buy them, put them in a starter, double them up, put half aside for next time, brew with the other half, and then repeat. This yeast in here has now been used 6 times. I'm actually going to use the yeast cake from this to ferment the next 2 beers that I'm brewing today. So that'll be 8 times, 8 brews that I've got out of 1 packet of White Labs yeast. And now I've bought a new one. I'm going to start the cycle again. Not that there's anything wrong with the yeast, but I guess it's best to start over rather than wait for something to go wrong with the yeast if it gets a bit old. So what I need to do is get this kegged while the mash is running downstairs, so that I've got access to this yeast cake ready for pitching when we get those 2 brews brewed. So I'm going to get on with that, then I'll check back in when I'm kegging. Right, so let's get this this batch kegged. I've got 2 kegs here. A corny keg, which is purged with CO2, and this holds 19 litres, as most of them do. So, and this is a 23 litre batch. So sometimes I bottle the excess, but I'm more likely these days to put the excess into one of these small mini kegs, 5 litres. You can buy them new if you wish, or my preferred way of sourcing them is to buy them full of nice beer for about twice the price of a new one, and then recycle them. So this has been dosed with a bit of sugar. You want between 10 and 15 grams of sugar, depending on the level of carbonation. This one's just got 10 because for this style I want a lower carbonation level. All of my fermenters now have taps because I found it a lot easier to run off from a tap than to faff about with a siphon. So I'm going to fill that up. That'll take 5 litres out of the total volume, and the rest will go into the corny keg. I've learned to my cost not to fill corny kegs too full. If your beer reaches the gas in, then there is a possibility, if you get a bit mixed up, of getting beer flushed into your gas regulator, which is what I did, and then had to get a new regulator. This is just a piece of silicone hosing that's been soaking in the star sand here. Because I've already put the sugar in, I don't have to leave any space in the keg, so I can just fill it right to the top. It's nearly there. That's it, stop. A little bit of overspill. That's it, I'll clean up that top and sanitise it. That then goes in the fermentation fridge for a short second fermentation. Release the CO2 pressure from the flushing. Now I can just let the whole of this run in without worrying about how full it is, because I know that it'll all fit in. So there we go, that's kegging. And I'll be back in a bit when we're kicking off the next brew. So here's the yeast in the bottom of the fermenter. You can see it's circulated out and clumped up. So what I'm going to do is get that out of there and into a flask and put it on my stove plate and just gently get it back in suspension again, ready for pitching into the new beers that we're brewing today. So I'll get that done now. Right, the first batch of beer is boiling away now. I've washed up the grain basket, ready for the second batch, and now I'm weighing out the grain for the second batch. So this is going to be a golden ale, single hopped with Citra. It's a beer that I've brewed. This is the 4th time I've brewed it. Each time I brew it, I am adjusting it and turning it in. My notes from last time said it was about there really on the sort of malt flavour, colour, hoppiness was getting there, but I just needed to make the hops pop more. So this is going to be exactly the same recipe as batch 3 in terms of the grain bill and so on, and hopping, but I'm adjusting the water treatment. So last time I went with a balanced water treatment, this time I've gone with a more hop forward water treatment. So that will be something like 50 parts per million of chloride, but 100 parts per million of sulfate, so a 2:1 ratio chloride to sulfate. Calcium's at about 60 parts per million, so we'll see if that just helps the hops hop. So I'll get this weighed out and then I'll be back with an update shortly. Okay, so first brew is in the fermenter, ready for pitching. I've got 23 litres as you can see at 10:44, so bang on the numbers, and that is 3 hours 40 minutes since we started mashing in that one, which is about typical for me. So another priority is get the Grainfather rinsed out. You don't have to do a full sanitation because it was sanitised before we started the first brew. So get that rinsed out, get the water treated and heating up, and then crack on with the second brew before we pitch this one. Okay, so here we go again, second brew going in. I'm mashing this one at 2 degrees higher, 68, the last one was at 66. It's about 4.5 kilogram grain bill, so on that awkward boundary between the small pipework and the large pipework, so I've put the large pipework top pipe in. Thought it might just be a bit big for the small pipework. So a little bit more about the water. As I think I said, my water is very minerally, very hard. So actually for most profiles that I make, I have to start by diluting it. I dilute it with reverse osmosis water, which to all intents and purposes is distilled, i.e. it's got no mineral content. I get that from a aquarium supplier, a local aquarium supplier, because fish keepers use it. Make sure you ask for one that's plain, because they also sell some that have minerals in for the fish. So in this brew, for example, it's 15 litre mash volume, and 6 litres of that is reverse osmosis water, topped up with tap water. I have a high residual alkalinity in my water, so I acidify it. I use phosphoric, 75% food grade acid, usually about 3 ml, aiming to get myself to a mash pH of 5.2, 5.3, around there. And then for this brew, as I said, I added gypsum, about 3 grams overall, to the mash and sparge, which will get me to about 100 parts per million sulphate, 50 parts per million chloride, so 2:1 sulphate to chloride ratio. Other than that, the recipe is the same as last time. I'm just going to see if that water treatment pops out the hops a bit more. So I'll get this mashed in and I'll be back later. Plenty of yeast circulating there now, so let's get that pitched into, well, half of it pitched into beer 1. Right, we're on the home straight now, so I'm just cooling the second brew, and for this recipe I use the hop rocket. So that's this. I've done a video on it back in on that channel somewhere. So I've got 60 grams of Citra hops in here. I cool the water in the Grainfather down to 80 degrees, so it's below isomerization temperature for the hops. And then I pump it through the hop rocket, then into the chiller, then into the cooler. The idea is the hop rocket infuses hops with the wort, which then immediately gets chilled. No chance for those aromatic oils to get lost anywhere. Immediately chilled and into the fermentation vessel. I've got my Blickman thermometer here. We're hitting 20 degrees with this sort of flow. I don't know if you can see that on there. Oops. Maximum flow basically. It's because it's winter and the tap water's so cold. You've got to be careful you don't get any of your hoses kinked with this rather more elaborate hose arrangement. There's the Blickman, and I'll just show you the sort of flow I'm getting. Get that focused. Just show you the sort of flow I'm getting. Like that, as fast as I can get it to go basically. And the green patch there shows that we're cooling down to 20 degrees, which is perfect, and I'll have that rip through there in no time at all. So I'll check in with you when we see what the numbers are. Okay, so that's second brew done, that's chilled. As you can see, I've hit the numbers, 23 litres there and 1042. My predicted starting gravity was 1041, so I'm happy with that. And how long has that taken, let me think. So that's 8 hours to do 2 brews. Just got a bit of cleaning up left to do, and then we're finished. So I'll get this aerated and pitched. I'm back shortly. There we go, that's a welcome sight, isn't it? 2 brews on the go, so that's my double brew day. The advantages of a double brew day, of course, is you only set up and then sanitize all your equipment once for the 2 brews, so it's quite time efficient. Okay, it's been 8 hours, but I've got 2 brews out of that, so it usually is 4 hours for me to get through a brew, just how long it takes, isn't it? But at least I've only got 1 clean-up to do, and in 2-3 weeks time I'll have those 2 beers ready for kegging. Okay, that's all for now, so happy brewing!